Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Mailbox for the 4th of October 2011. My name is Totalbiscuit, bringing you your daily dose of community interaction, gaming discussion, and all that good stuff. You can email in mailbox at cynicalbrit.com, that is mailbox at cynicalbrit.com, with topics for future shows. First email comes in from SK. It says, "Hey TB, I was wondering what were your thoughts on the insane difficulty in Demon and Dark Souls? Are they valuable throwbacks making gamers cherish every victory, or a cheap gimmick the devs have cornered?" Certainly not a cheap gimmick. I mean, when you design your entire game around the idea that it's brutally, punishingly hard, and yet always fair, that's a lot of effort. That goes beyond a gimmick. The gimmick would be the idea of perhaps, well, this guy could shoot lasers from his eyes. But no, that's not what the game is all about. The entire essence of Demon's Souls is based around its difficulty, because if you look at every aspect of it, it all ties back into the fact that the game is a challenge. The oppressive atmosphere, for instance. The way the combat system handles, the weight of the character. Simple ideas like that. That all contributes to the idea that they wanted to make this game challenging, and every single element of it is challenging. I think the oppressive atmosphere is actually the thing you should fixate on the most, because having something like that makes every victory seem better. Because, to be honest, the whole game seems hopeless. Everything that's going on seems absolutely, completely, and totally hopeless. An example for those who know anything about Demon's Souls in World 5, Maiden Astrea. Everything about that is just depressing when you think about it. I can't think of a single happy thing in that game, and Dark Souls is apparently even more crazy like that. But there's little glimpses of hope. It's like there's this giant black cloud, and occasionally you just see this really tiny ray of sunshine peek through just for a fraction of a second. The idea, for instance, that in Dark Souls, you're connected online, and that's the way that the game's really meant to be played, and other players can be sort of seen as ghosts around you, but you can't directly interact with them. Every now and again, there's this bell tower that will actually toll when somebody defeats a boss, and that idea is supposed to spur you on to victory, knowing, there is hope, there are other people that are actually doing these things. It makes the challenge seem a little bit less insurmountable. And then you look at the combat system, for instance, and how you know exactly why you died every single time. Like, the game is very, very honest with you about how you failed, and it communicates this information in an extremely effective manner, and it provides the tools to learn from your mistakes, assuming that you are willing to take up that challenge. So, I think everything about the difficulty is absolutely integral to what Demon's Souls is, and indeed what Dark Souls is. I don't think it should be in every game by any stretch. I think that Dark Souls and Demon's Souls, and to some lesser degree King's Field, were and are very much unique experiences. I certainly don't think we need to see a rash of those games, but it's a design aspect that developers could very, very much learn from. I think for the longest time, developers have treated difficulty as a chore, a necessity, if you will, that they have to cater to the widest possible range of players, and as a result, they've got to muck about with their game balance. They've got to nerf things beyond where they want them to be, so that they take it down to an ineffectual challenge. They effectively have to neuter their game for the sake of people that don't really know what they're doing. And Demon's Souls turned right around and said, if you're not good enough, get out. We don't care. In fact, if you screw up too much, we're actually going to make the game harder for you. That's pretty damn unique, especially in a title that actually sold a significant number of copies and got some marketing behind it for the sequel. And we should see Demon and Dark Souls perhaps as a way that the games industry can branch out in a direction that it's not perhaps dealt with before. The idea that extreme challenge can be appealing to a fairly wide audience, which is the polar opposite, of course, to all of the casual games that we've seen lately, and it proves that hardcore games can also sell if properly designed. This one comes in from an anonymous viewer that says, "It was recently announced that the PC version of Rage will not come with any graphical options. The game will instead auto-adjust your hardware to meet 60 frames per second. This is not an optional thing, it's entirely forced on the user. Personally, I find this insanely idiotic. Auto-adjust in games has always been known to be wacky, and I find it extremely uncomfortable that the game might not allow me to enjoy it in the graphical level my PC is actually capable of because of some faulty assumptions made by auto-adjust. Besides, there are plenty of people who are willing to sacrifice 20 to 30 FPS for better visuals. Why on earth are they forcing this on everyone, and what is your opinion on it?" Well, you'll see really in my WTF is my fully detailed thoughts on the game in general, but I can take this opportunity to focus purely on the lack of options. I honestly think the lack of options is utterly criminal. It really, really is, and it's a disgrace for id Software in particular to do something like this when they have such a rich history of PC development. The very idea of it is absurd, and just bear in mind that they're also an engine manufacturer. You know, they're an engine developer. They used to be the guys that provided the big engines that everyone used. The Quake engine, the Quake 2 engine, the Quake 3 engine in particular were huge engines, and they were sold to an awful lot of different companies. In fact, it's only recently that Epic Games has surpassed id in that regard with the Unreal 3 engine and the amount of games that have been made on that. Now, this is the id Tech 5 engine, and one would think that you would want to demonstrate the full power of all of the options available to you, and they decide to hide all of them. What? How does that make any sense? And yeah, I agree with your point. Yes, some people are actually okay playing at about 30 FPS. They're all right with that because they want all the sparkle. Personally, I'm not happy with anything below 60. I don't like it. It doesn't feel good to me. But I can understand that I am not the only person in the world, and there are different people with different requirements. Plus, bear in mind that I don't necessarily trust the auto-adjust either. And for instance, there are certain graphical options that I would consider a higher priority than others. For instance, screen space ambient occlusion is often a big hog on the processor. Yet, honestly, I barely see the difference. But I love my depth of field. I really, really do. I think depth of field makes games look amazing. So I want my depth of field on, but I want my SSAO off. But the game may choose the other way around because that's what it views as the priority. That I am not okay with. I am, without question, not okay with that idea. It's a very, very poor thing indeed. Now, I have a feeling that eventually people are going to figure out the way to get a configuration tool together that will actually allow you to change things around. I mean, for instance, I've already been able to change the FOV with a dev console command as well as a launch command. I imagine there are other commands that can be used, and they'll be discovered over the next few days. But the very notion that I have to use those is, quite frankly, disgraceful. What is going on with that? We had these big problems as well with Crysis 2, and eventually that was sorted out with a patch, and we had a lot of graphical options made available to us. What is it with these developers with their high-tech engines restricting what we can do with them? What exactly are they afraid of? I really cannot figure that one out. Is it a marketing reason? Is it just pure laziness? I mean, I think in the case of id, it just comes down to arrogance. It comes down to the idea that they think they know best, and honestly, no, they don't, because there's no way that they could possibly know best with all of these configurations available. Millions upon maybe even billions of combinations of parts available for PCs. Performance is going to vary from machine to machine, and yes, there are people that know what they want. And as far as I'm concerned, if you want an auto configuration option in the game, then put it in. But also give us the ability to change things around to our liking if we so desire. I do not like any game that closes options off like that, in the same way that I don't like games that close off the ideas of modding. I buy a game and I expect to be able to tinker with it just a little bit to get it the way that I want. I'm a PC gamer and I pay extra money to have really big, beefy hardware so that I can make sure that I get the best possible gaming experience. I don't want my game telling me what that experience is. If I wanted that, I would play those games on a console. This one comes in from Locad that says, I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on the current state of the space game genre. With the current hardware power of CPUs and graphics cards, I think it would be possible to create huge universes with hundreds, maybe even thousands of spacecraft of all possible sizes and maybe destructible space debris or even planets. Yet with all this prospect year after year, no great successor to Free Space Freelancer, Privateer, The Darkening, or X-Series emerges. What are your thoughts on the matter? Are things as dark as I make them out to be? And if so, why do you think space sims are nearly considered dead in 2011? Well, they're nearly considered dead because nobody's really bringing them out. However, there is a sequel to X coming in. X Rebirth is on its way, and I'm very much looking forward to that. EgoSoft, I don't really know how they keep doing it, but they keep doing it, and I'm very grateful to them for that. They're able to constantly iterate on the X franchise and sell enough copies, obviously, to keep themselves in business. Once again, I don't know how, but I think maybe because they're the last big refuge of freeform space games, I think that they have a market niche, and as a result, they're able to exploit that. I don't know if any company at the moment really could. And a lot of people say, well, you know, I'd love another Wing Commander game or things like that. And you wonder, well, how are you going to manage to create something in the current environment. I mean, for instance, if EA was to make another Wing Commander game, do you really think it would be PC exclusive? No, it wouldn't. And space games on consoles are tricky because consoles generally don't have enough buttons to deal with them. I remember playing Starlancer on the Dreamcast, and it worked fairly well, but you've got to understand that Starlancer was, for the most part, a fairly simple game. It certainly wasn't anywhere near as complicated as Freelancer, for instance. So if you want to put in anything remotely complicated, like, say, fleet control, or an economy, or the idea of building space stations, for instance, this is what I like most about X, the ability to construct your own objects in space, complexes, build your own ships and things like that. That's really hard to put into a console game simply because of the interface. You know what? Things like that actually make me hate pads. They really, really do. Joypads have made making games like this unfeasible as hell on consoles, and at no point will a company ever say, well, you need a mouse and keyboard to play this on console, because they know that they've just lost 99% of their audience. It's really difficult, and these controllers have become very limiting factors for a great deal of different games. I mean, why do you think the two-weapon system, for instance, became so popular? It wasn't just that it made the game easier to design, it made it easier to play on a console pad, and that has actually infected PC gaming as well, and I'm not a big fan of that. No, no, no. So who do you look for another space sim? Because you need to look at somebody who is willing to put something out on PC as a PC exclusive. There are not all that many big companies that will do that anymore, honestly. Very, very few. If it's an MMO, yes. That's where you will get big, big investment. And something like that would work. The problem is there's already a big one on the market. It goes by the name of EVE Online. And there's, of course, Black Prophecy as well. Is Jumpgate Evolution still coming out? I know it's been delayed for quite some time, at least 2 years now, so God knows if that's ever coming out. But for single player, I don't know, I could see Paradox perhaps taking on something like that, maybe, but Paradox is not exactly known for its intense graphics technology, so I have a feeling Paradox would publish something like that, and then you get some other team in it. If you give it to an indie, then the problem is that you don't get that graphical fidelity that you expect from something in 2011 when it comes to the space sim genre, something like, say, X Beyond the Frontier and X Rebirth, more to the point. They sort of set the bar, and that bar is quite difficult to reach. So it's a really tricky sell, isn't it? Because it is a niche market, very much a niche market. While X obviously sells enough, you never see it pumping out great sales figures. Like, hey, we sold X number of million copies of this, and I'm sure that it does sell in sales and things like that, and they do play the long game when it comes to selling the game over the course of a number of years at several different price points. But once again, I ask you, who's going to develop it? I can't think of anybody. I'm sorry, I can't. I don't think that indie studios are necessarily equipped to create something like that. That kind of game is huge. Right? X, for instance, the universe is massive. The amount of stuff that goes on in that, the amount of systems and mechanics in place, and of course the amount of art assets, it's massive. It's a huge undertaking. So, who's going to make it? Well, honestly, I think the PC has got to not so much rise to prominence again, but it's definitely got to capture a larger segment of the market share for people to think about PC exclusive development again. And by that, I mean big companies beyond, of course, Facebook games and MMOs, the two which they are more than willing to create PC exclusives for. And that's not going to happen yet. And that's unfortunate. But in the meantime, we do have those two MMOs, and we do have X Rebirth on the way. And I would strongly encourage anyone who is interested in space games, for instance, to go and check out X3 Terran Conflict. It is absolutely astonishing. It is an incredible game, and if you want something to sink a lot of time into, that pretty much is it. It is so good. You can create massive stations. You can buy any ship, from the tiniest fighter all the way through to giant capital ships. It's got a decent story, it's got a huge amount of content in it, it's got an active modding scene. It is a wonderful, wonderful game that will suck up vast amounts of your time if you are willing to give it to it. Strongly, highly, 110% recommended. What can I say? It's freaking wonderful. Alright folks, that is me done for the day. Thank you very, very much indeed for watching the Mailbox, and I will see you next time.